All right, so today we're going deep on something that's maybe not the most glamorous part of trading,
Right.
but it's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
We're talking about infrastructure. And specifically, we are diving into QuantVPS, which is a virtual private server provider, a VPS.
VPS, yeah.
But they're not just for anyone. They've really kind of carved out this niche for themselves, focusing on a very specific type of trader.
Right.
The CME trader.
Right.
The Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
Okay.
So that's kind of our mission today, is to figure out what makes QuantVPS tick, what makes them stand out, and why should a CME trader specifically care about what they're doing?
Yeah, and I think to really get at that, we need to understand why they've taken this super specialized approach.
Right.
What benefits does it actually give traders to have this infrastructure that's tailored to just the CME?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, most VPS providers, they try to be everything to everyone.
Right, kind of a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. But QuantVPS is like, no, we're going laser focused. And to help us understand, we've got some really interesting excerpts from an interview with Ryan, the co-founder and CEO of QuantVPS.
Okay.
And what really stood out to me right off the bat was his background.
Yeah.
He's not just like a tech guy who decided to dip his toes into finance. He's been deep in both worlds for a while. And he's got this specific experience in futures trading within the CME group exchanges.
Oh, wow. So he's actually been in the trenches.
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like it was actually his own frustrations with the existing options out there that led him to create QuantVPS.
It's funny. Those are often the best solutions, right?
Yeah.
When someone's like, I've lived this problem and there's got to be a better way.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. What was it specifically that Ryan found so frustrating about the generic VPS providers out there?
Well, he talks a lot about how they just weren't cutting it for serious CME futures traders.
Okay.
Like they weren't built with the things that those traders need most.
And what are those things? What was he hitting up against?
He kept coming back to latency.
Like ultra low latency being absolutely crucial.
Right. Milliseconds matter.
Yeah, exactly. And not just having fast servers, but being physically close to the CME servers in Chicago.
Right, because the closer you are, the less distance the data has to travel.
Exactly. And when you're trading in markets where things move so fast, those milliseconds can make or break you.
Absolutely. And he wasn't just talking about any CME trader, though, right?
No, he had a very specific type in mind.
Right.
He specifically mentioned traders who are running automated strategies, especially those trading like the ES and the NQ.
Okay. The E-mini S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Q100.
Yeah, exactly. Those are like the big boys.
Yeah, super liquid, incredibly fast-moving market.
Yeah, so even the tiniest edge can make a big difference there.
So it sounds like the core idea behind QuantVPS is to give those specific futures traders a genuine tech advantage.
Yeah, it's not just about having a server somewhere. It's about having a server that's specifically engineered for these high-performance CME strategies. Exactly.
Yeah.
So in a crowded market full of VPS providers, what are the key things that actually set QuantVPS apart?
Well, first and foremost, it's that focus.
Okay.
That laser focus on futures traders in the CME. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're like, this is our lane and we're going to be the best at it.
I like that.
And because of that focus, their entire infrastructure is built specifically for the demands of those markets.
Right.
Like trading the ES and the NQ.
So we keep coming back to this idea of latency. How do they actually achieve that sub-millisecond connection to the CME servers?
They've got a few tricks up their sleeve.
Okay.
First of all, they're using some seriously powerful hardware.
Like what kind of stuff?
Ryan specifically mentioned AMD EPYC processors and DDR4 RAM.
Okay, so top of the line stuff.
Yeah, the best of the best. But it's not just about the hardware. They're also using something called direct network peering with the CME.
Okay, I'm not super technical.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
So basically, it's like having a direct flight versus having to go through multiple layovers. Every time your data has to hop from one network to another, it adds a little bit of delay.
Right.
Direct peering eliminates those hops, so your data takes the most direct route possible.
So it's like having a dedicated express lane just for your trading data.
Exactly, and that's how they get that crazy low 0 to 1 millisecond latency.
Which can be huge, especially when you're talking about automated strategy.
Oh, absolutely. Those algorithms are making decisions in fractions of a second. Any delay can throw things off.
And it's not just about speed either, right? Reliability is super important too.
Oh yeah, especially in the futures markets.
Right, because if your server goes down at the wrong time, it could be a disaster.
Exactly, and Ryan knows that, so they've built a ton of redundancy into their system.
Like what kind of redundancy?
Well, they've got backup power systems, so if there's a power outage, you're still good to go.
Okay, that's smart.
They've also got multiple network routes, so if one connection goes down, your data can automatically reroute. And they've got 24/7 monitoring with instant failover.
Okay, so someone's always watching, and if something goes wrong, they can switch to a backup system immediately.
Yeah, basically they've done everything they can to eliminate single points of failure.
And that's what gives you that peace of mind, knowing that your trading platform is going to stay up and running no matter what.
Exactly, you don't have to worry about missing out on a trade because of some technical glitch.
So let's talk a bit more about the platforms themselves. Ryan mentioned that they do pre-installation and optimization for a bunch of popular platforms.
Yeah, he specifically named TradeStation, NinjaTrader, Quantower Tradivite, and even Interactive Brokers.
So pretty much all the big players in the CME space.
Exactly.
And what does that pre-optimization actually involve?
Well, it goes beyond just installing the software. They actually configure it for you.
Okay.
So they've got like pre-designed chart layouts that are specifically tailored for futures trading. And they can even set up your backtesting environment for you if you're into developing your own strategies.
That's pretty handy. I mean, setting all that stuff up yourself can be a real pain.
Oh yeah, it can take hours. And if you're not super tech savvy, it can be really frustrating.
So having QuantVPS do it for you can save a lot of time and headaches.
Absolutely. And it means you can start trading sooner.
Right. You're not sitting there fiddling with settings while the market's moving.
Exactly. And they don't just stop there. They can also help you with setting up your data feeds from the CME.
Oh, that's a big one. I've heard that could be a real nightmare.
Yeah, it can be really complicated, especially if you're trying to get multiple feeds for different contracts.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of resource allocation, making sure your VPS has enough horsepower to handle everything.
Yeah, they can help you with that too.
So they basically take care of all the technical stuff so you can focus on trading.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Now, we've been talking a lot about CME futures, but I know QuantVPS also caters to Forex traders.
Right. And while their main selling point for futures traders is that Chicago location.
Right, because that's what the CME is.
Exactly. They do have some features that benefit all traders.
Okay, like what kind of stuff?
Well, they use SSD storage, which is super fast for data access.
Oh?
They give you dedicated IP addresses, which can be more secure and reliable. And they have automatic backup, so you don't lose your data if something goes wrong.
That's always a good thing.
And they also have different service plans, so you can choose one that fits your needs.
Right, because not everyone needs the same level of resources.
Exactly. If you're just running MetaTrader for Forex, you don't need a monster server.
But if you're running multiple platforms and backtesting and all that stuff, you need something more powerful.
Right, so they've got options for everyone.
So Ryan also talked about some of the challenges that traders, especially those using automated systems, often face with generic VPS setups.
Yeah, he highlighted a few common pain points.
Okay, like what?
Well, latency spikes are a big one.
Right, where your connection suddenly slows down for no apparent reason.
Yeah, and that can really mess up your trades, especially if you're relying on precise execution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's the dreaded downtime.
Yeah, the worst.
All right, you're in the middle of a trade and suddenly your platform freezes.
And then you have no idea what's happening
Managing
or when
all
it's
those
coming
data
back.
feeds.
So stressful. Right,
And then
especially if
the
you're
other
running
big
multiple
one is just the
strategies on
complexity
multiple
of-
contracts.
Yeah, it can be a real headache.
So how does QuantVPS address those issues?
Well, their whole infrastructure is designed to prevent those things from happening in the first place.
Okay.
So their sub-millisecond latency pretty much eliminates those random latency spikes. Their 99.9% uptime guarantee means you're extremely unlikely to experience any downtime.
That's reassuring.
And they've streamlined the whole setup process, so it's a lot less complicated to get everything up and running.
Okay, so they're basically trying to make life easier for traders.
Yeah, take away all the technical headaches so you can focus on what matters.
Now let's talk about security for a minute, because obviously that's a huge concern when you're dealing with sensitive financial information.
Absolutely, and Ryan really emphasized that they take security very seriously.
Okay, so what kind of measures do they have in place?
Well, they've got enterprise-grade firewalls to block unauthorized access.
Okay.
They've got DDoS mitigation to protect against cyber attacks. They use encrypted connections to keep your data safe while it's being transmitted.
Okay.
And each VPS is isolated from other users, so your stuff is completely separate.
Right, so you don't have to worry about someone else on the same server snooping around.
Exactly. And they also conduct regular security audits just to make sure everything is up to snuff.
So they're not just setting it and forgetting it. they're constantly checking and improving their security.
Yeah, they know that security is an ongoing process.
And of course, they have those automatic backups too, which can help with data recovery.
Right, so if something does happen, you can get your stuff back quickly and easily.
So shifting gears a bit, Ryan also talked about the role of AI in trading, which is something we've been hearing more and more about lately.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
So what's his take on it specifically for CME futures?
Well, he sees AI as a game changer.
Okay.
He thinks it's going to revolutionize the way we trade.
How so?
Well, for one thing, he thinks it's going to lead to much more sophisticated, automated strategies. Strategies that can learn and adapt to changing market conditions in real time.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
He also thinks AI is going to be huge for risk management because it can analyze massive amounts of data in a way that humans just can't.
Right, so it can spot potential risks before they become problems.
Exactly. And of course, he sees AI as a powerful tool for predictive analysis.
Okay.
So basically using AI to forecast what's going to happen in the market.
And is QuantVPS doing anything specific to support this AI-driven future?
Yeah, they're definitely positioning themselves to be a part of it.
Okay.
Ryan mentioned that their current servers are already powerful enough to handle those AI-heavy workloads. But they're also exploring other tools and services that could help traders develop and optimize their AI strategies.
Okay, so they're not just providing the infrastructure, they're thinking about the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
So for those of us who are actually trading CME futures, what are some specific things we can do to optimize our VPS performance?
Well, Ryan had a few key recommendations.
Okay.
First and foremost, choose a Chicago data center.
Right, to minimize that latency.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
Make sure you have enough CPU and RAM.
okay, especially if you're running multiple platforms or complex strategies.
Okay. He also said to check your latency regularly and aim for that 0 to 1 millisecond range. And he said, don't be afraid to reach out to QuantVPS support for help with configuring your platform.
Right, they're the experts.
Exactly. And finally, he said to monitor your resource usage, especially during volatile periods.
Okay, so if you see things starting to slow down,
Yeah.
you might need to upgrade your plan.
Right.
Makes sense.
So running a service like QuantVPS with all those specific requirements must have its own challenges.
Right, especially when you're trying to scale the business.
Exactly. So I asked Ryan about that, and he said, yeah, it's definitely not easy.
Okay. What are some of the hurdles they've faced?
Well, meeting those super tight latency requirements consistently is a big one.
Right, those milliseconds matter.
And then handling those massive data feeds for the ES and Q is another challenge.
Yeah, those are some of the most heavily traded contracts in the world.
And then on top of that, they have to support all those different trading platforms.
Right, each with its own quirks and requirements.
So it's a lot to juggle.
So how have they managed to overcome those challenges?
Well, they've been really strategic about their infrastructure choices.
Okay.
They've partnered with top-tier data centers in Chicago to get that prime location. And they've invested heavily in system optimization to squeeze every bit of performance out of their hardware.
And they've also built a team that understands both the tech and the trading side of things.
Yeah, that's been crucial.
So to wrap things up, what are the key takeaways here for the listener?
I think the big picture is that QuantVPS is not your average VPS provider. They're laser focused on a specific niche CME futures traders.
And they've really gone above and beyond to cater to those traders' needs.
Yeah, they understand the demands of those markets, and they've built their entire infrastructure around meeting those demands.
And I think that's what really sets them apart.
Absolutely.
So if you're a CME futures trader, and especially if you're using automated systems, QuantVPS is definitely worth a look.
Yeah, they can potentially give you a real edge.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. How might optimizing your trading infrastructure, something as fundamental as your VPS provider, impact your overall trading performance and profitability?
It's a question worth pondering because sometimes it's those things that we don't even think about.
Right, the things behind the scenes.
That can make a huge difference.
Exactly. So take some time to evaluate your current setup and see if there are any hidden limitations that might be holding you back.
Because even small improvements can add up over time.
Absolutely. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
And happy trading.
Yeah, good luck out there.